March 7th, 2025, 6:42 a.m. It was supposed to be a celebration. A family of 4 had just pulled out of the driveway of their mountain resort cabin in northwest Montana. Fresh snow dusted the trees. Sunlight was barely cutting through the mist. They were headed back to California in a brand new midnight blue electric SUV, top of the line, fully loaded, not even a month old. Inside, a father in his 40s, a mother beside him, and 2 teenage kids in the back, still groggy from the early start. They had no idea what was waiting for them less than 10 miles down the road. Dashcam footage recovered later would show their final minutes, laughter, a conversation about breakfast, the youngest asking if they could stop for pancakes. Then, suddenly, movement in the trees, something massive. The SUV slowed near a bend where the forest narrowed tight around the road. A steep slope ran up on one side, with thick pines blocking the view. The vehicle came to a crawl. The father, his name was Darren, was about to roll down the window, thinking the road was blocked by a fallen branch. But it wasn't a branch. It was a grizzly, and not just any bear. This one was over 800 pounds, male, territorial, and for reasons no one can fully explain, aggressive in a way local wildlife experts later called abnormal. It had been spotted before, tracked even, but until that morning, it had never attacked anything larger than a deer. That changed in seconds. The bear moved first, charging directly at the SUV's front end with a speed that didn't make sense for something that size. The footage shows the car jerking back. Darren tried to reverse, but the road was slick. Tires spun. Then the camera goes blurry as the bear slams into the hood, cracking the windshield in one massive strike. And that was just the beginning. The glass didn't shatter all at once. The windshield cracked like a spider web, centered right where the bear's skull had hit. For a second, the footage goes chaotic. A scream, the sound of tires skidding, then the view jerks sideways as the car lurches into a shallow ditch. The bear doesn't back off. It climbs onto the hood, its claws raking deep grooves into the metal like it's peeling back a soda can. The front camera dies right after that, but the rest of the damage would be seen later. Claw marks down to the frame, paint torn away, the hood folded in. Inside the SUV, the family tried to get out. Investigators later found the rear doors open. The son, 16 years old, had made it about 30 feet into the trees. He never saw the second bear coming. This one wasn't on camera, but it was there. Prints confirmed it. Smaller, female, but just as dangerous. Something had provoked them. But what? Rangers found no carcass nearby. No cubs. No wounded animals. Just 2 grizzlies. One that attacked a car like it was prey, and another that chased a running teenager through a silent forest. The autopsy later showed the boy died instantly. Fast. No suffering. The daughter, 14, never left the car. She was found still in the back seat, seatbelt on, head turned toward the shattered side window. The mother tried to shield her. Her arms were bruised, wrapped protectively around her daughter. She fought, hard, but nothing could stop what came through that broken glass. Only the father made it out of the vehicle. He ran for the road, barefoot, in the snow. The tracks were clear. He almost made it. 10 yards from the main highway, his body was found, collapsed in the ditch, blood loss, shock, torn muscle. It all happened in under 5 minutes. 5. That's all it took. But why? Why would 2 grizzlies attack a family inside a moving vehicle, miles from any feeding ground or den? That question wouldn't be answered for another 12 days. And when it was, it wouldn't just explain what happened. It would reveal something far more terrifying, something that had been quietly building for years, just beneath the surface. 12 days after the attack, the investigation was still nowhere near over. The media had already run with the headline, "Grizzly Bear Kills Family of 4 in Freak Attack," but the wildlife team on the ground wasn't convinced. Something about the scene didn't match any known pattern. Bears don't break windshields. They don't attack metal like prey, and they don't coordinate attacks, especially not 2 at the same time. The first clue came from the autopsy team. Both bears were eventually located and euthanized per public safety protocol. When examined, rangers found something strange in the male grizzly's stomach. Shards of plastic, a strip of rubber, and what looked like packaging foam. But more alarming, trace elements of a synthetic compound used in vehicle interiors. Materials not usually ingested unless a bear had been specifically drawn to it. Wildlife toxicologist reviewed the report and raised the first major red flag. The bear's nervous system showed signs of overstimulation. Not rabies, not disease, but chemical agitation, a toxin, something man-made, something it wasn't supposed to consume. And somehow, that toxin had triggered an unnatural reaction, one that made the bear hypersensitive, volatile, and unafraid of things it would normally avoid. The female bear told a different story. Her claws were clean, no sign of rubber, metal, or interior damage, but her blood work showed something else. Hunger, severe. Her fat stores had dropped lower than they should have been in early March, which begged the question, why was she starving when the winter had been mild and food sources were steady? It led investigators to a logging site 6 miles north. A new operation had just begun there, weeks earlier, clearing land to make room for a future eco-resort. The company had denied any disruption to wildlife paths, but drone scans said otherwise. Entire migration corridors had been cut off, feeding zones trampled, and toxic runoff from machinery had pooled into a creek that once served as a fresh water source for multiple species. The grizzlies didn't go rogue. They were pushed. And what happened on March 7th wasn't an accident. It was a chain reaction, one that had started long before the SUV turned that corner. 3 days after the environmental reports came in, a junior field tech named Lena received a call from someone she didn't expect, her old college roommate, now working at the PR division of the logging company involved in the land clearance. It wasn't a casual call. Her voice was low, tense. "They're scrubbing files," she said. "Satellite images, water contamination logs, everything from February. If you're on the internal list, delete what you've got. Don't get dragged into this." Lena didn't hang up. She didn't delete anything either. Instead, she backed it all up. Photos, soil tests, footage from wildlife cams that had captured the logging equipment tearing through feeding corridors without permits. She sent it, anonymously, to a national conservation agency. Within 48 hours, a federal team was dispatched to the site, not for wildlife control, but for corporate investigation. The logging company issued a statement, claiming no direct link to the attack. They blamed unpredictable animal behavior and natural wilderness risk. But the timeline was becoming harder to ignore. The chemical compounds found in the bear's system matched those used in the flame retardants sprayed on heavy machinery. The water contamination lined up with a breached sediment pool that had overflowed the week prior to the attack, and a leaked internal email showed that upper management had been warned about possible animal displacement 2 months before the fatal incident. Still, the story struggled to catch public attention. The headlines focused on the horror, family mauled by giant bear in front of teens. But beneath the shock, the real story was hiding in plain sight, how a family, simply trying to go home, became the final spark in a chain of corporate carelessness and ignored warnings, and the part that made people sick once they finally understood. The bears weren't hunting, they were running, disoriented, starving, sick, trying to survive in a forest that no longer made sense to them. But the SUV had blocked their path, and what happened next was instinct, twisted by the damage done to their world. It took weeks for the lawsuits to start, but they did. The logging company denied liability, the resort company distanced itself, and politicians called it a tragic act of nature. But by then the facts were out. The contaminated creek, the destroyed migration route, the evidence of chemical exposure in the bear's bloodstream. The experts called it a textbook collapse. When stressed, wildlife meets careless expansion. But for the people watching, it wasn't a case study. It was a funeral. 3 caskets, 1 small urn, a family gone in under 5 minutes. A memorial was held at the bend in the road where the SUV was found. The hood still bore the claw marks. The windshield was never replaced. They left it as it was, glass fractured, like veins across a cold surface, because sometimes broken things say more than words ever can. Lena stood quietly at the back. No press, no camera crew, just locals, rangers, a few conservationists who understood what had really happened. One of them stepped forward to speak. He didn't blame the bears. He didn't even say the company's name. He just held up a photo, and aerial shot of the forest taken 5 years earlier, lush, untouched, alive. Then he held up another one, taken last month, clear-cut, brown, silent. "This is how it starts," he said. "Not with teeth, but with noise, chainsaws, concrete, chemicals, and when it ends, we call it unexpected, as if we weren't warned." The clip spread across the internet. People who'd seen the original headline, "Grizzly Bear," kills family in luxury SUV, now saw something different. A slow, quiet build-up to a catastrophe we created, then refused to take responsibility for. And somewhere in Montana, 2 wild animals paid the price for acting like wild animals in a world that kept closing in on them. What happened on March 7th wasn't just a freak accident. It was a warning that the wild doesn't stay quiet forever. That, when we ignore the signs, the cost isn't just forests and rivers. Sometimes, it's people, and by the time we care, it's already too late.